Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Dr. Glenn is a clinical psychologist and former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leaving the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Before we get started, if you haven't downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com. I am here with a kind-hearted gentleman named Gideon. And Gideon has agreed to share his experience and strength and hope and wisdom, as well as his trials and tribulations and stumbles and falls, so that all of you can benefit from his story and his experience. Right, Gideon?
Right.
So Gideon, tell me about your life before you found our materials and our methods, and then what happened?
So I'm 40 years old and struggled with my weight since I was a teenager, essentially. And I've always been a bit heavy, but I think when I was a teenager, that was the first time I started to notice and care and try to do something about it. My weight has certainly fluctuated. Using intermittent fasting, I got all the way down to 135 pounds, very close to my goal weight. Went back up, got back down using kind of a restrictive diet. As an adult, I went to this weight loss program where you had to go in person and report and confess your sins and follow their particular low-fat diet. Of course, gain the weight back immediately. I've tried low carb, tried all the diets like everybody. One of the things that's worked best for me but hasn't worked is intermittent fasting, because I believe in the science of it. I love the way it feels, but it's hard to stick to over a long period of time. And it's even harder to control your eating between fasts. I've probably been intermittent fasting for about 10 years, gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, because of that exact issue of either I don't stick to the fasting or I don't control my eating during the fasting. Most recently, I gained the COVID-19, as they say, so I'm near my heaviest weight that I've ever been. Actually, through my intermittent fasting coaching program, that's where I discovered originally your previous program, and then that led me to this program. That's where things really started to change in terms of my ability to follow the eating plan that I had set for myself logically, as this is what I want to do, right?
And then what happened?
I found your book and it was incredible. For a few weeks, I didn't deviate from my rules at all. Then I started deviating again. And then eventually the coaching program opened up and I started working with Coach Fiona, who helped me. The course that's part of the program really clarified some aspects of the Defeat Your Cravings practice for me and really gave me the step-by-step plus Coach Fiona's guidance. So things were going well. I was binging less, but still occasionally having those conscious pig parties. And then I got to the part of the course where you write down your big why. I feel like everything changed. Once I had that big why, I mean, I have not binged once, intentionally at least, since I wrote down my big why, nor have I wanted to for more than like a second. It's almost like the pig died or like the cage got welded shut. Like as soon as I knew my big why, my higher self was just in the driver's seat and had no intention of getting out of the driver's seat. Just really transformative.
What was it about the big why that was so transformative? Was there some major insight that you came to? Was it just that you'd never really thought of it before? What was it about the big why that was so transformational for you?
I think it's the way you have us write it down with so much detail. I've been told previously that I need a big why, and I would come up with something very simple like, oh, I want to look better. I want to feel better. But writing down a whole like half a page, this is what my life will be like, and tying it to 100% compliance with my rules, so that the big why isn't just, well, here's what I kind of want, but not only here's how I'm going to get there, here's what my commitment is. But not only that, not only having that written down, but also the practice of reading it every single day, that was also part of the transformation. In the past, I would sometimes think about my big why and get energized for a while. And then the salience of that would fade from my mind, and my survival brain, my pig, would take over again. Right. Once I had that big why written down with a lot of detail so I could envision it, here's what my life will be like if I comply with the rules 100%. And I'm never going to forget about this because I just read it at most like 8, 12 hours ago. Keeping it at the front of my mind is what keeps my higher self in the driver's seat.
Would you be willing to share your big why, or do you feel like it's too private?
No, I'd be happy to share my big why. I don't think it's anything unusual. I bet a lot of guys could identify with this big why. Maybe that's arrogant of me, but
It had a tremendous impact on you. And you said you haven't wanted to binge one time since you discovered it. I'd just like everybody to hear what you're actually talking about, if it's okay.
yeah. So my big why is I comply with my food rules 100% at all times because that has allowed me to achieve my weight goals in my early 40s. It feels great. I've done something so many people struggle to do, and with so much life and health left ahead of me. My belly is gone. I look thin and strong with visibly muscular arms. My eyes are bright. My face is mature with defined cheekbones. I no longer need to keep a beard or keep my hair longer just to hide my round cheeks. I'm free of GERD. My lower back pain is gone. I'm always ready for a walk or a yoga practice or some weight training, which I do because I'm overflowing with energy and I love how it feels to move my light, strong body. I'm a role model for my friends and family, and I'm on several dating apps where I'm getting positive attention from attractive women. I've got a beautiful custom suit I can wear on formal occasions, and I can't wait for group photographs where my fabulous transformation will be documented for posterity.
Getting that's beautiful. That's a really powerful big why. Very succinct, but very descript and detailed and believable. It's something that you've actually achieved for the most part. So I understand why that's working for you now. You did everything right. That's wonderful. Has your inner pig bothered you since you wrote that? Have you had to refute any particularly difficult squeals?
I don't think so. I would almost say the pig died when I came up with the big why. That's not quite true because I know the definition of a pig squeal is any thought suggesting you might break your rules, right? But it's sort of different in character. Instead of feeling a craving like, oh, I really want this, it's more inquisitive. Like the pig changed from trying to push me to do things. Instead, it's asking permission, right? It knows that the higher self is in charge. So it's like, well, could we do this? And then my higher self is immediately like, no, no, that's against the rules. We're not doing that. And it's no big
I
deal.
see. I see. See, you had a shift in the power base. The pig's rationale immediately seemed silly, and you recognize that you're 100% in control. It's not in control. The big why was instrumental in affecting that transfer. You're the pig's master, not its slave.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing to keep in mind about the pig, maybe this is a little bit more advanced, maybe some people should cover their ears, but it's like the pig isn't evil. The pig is stupid, right? The pig wants me to survive. It just has no idea what survival looks like in this modern world, right? Where actually just following ancient survival drives is what tends to kill us these days, right? So wanting to eat when it's time to eat, that's great. you know, Wanting to eat pig slop, obviously, is the part of the survival drive that we're here to dominate and cage.
What you're describing is that semantically, it's just a speck different, just a speck different. You're like almost 100% there. The way that I've conceived it anyway, that semantically, the pig is the survival drive when it's made a biological error and it's driving you to do something against your best interest because it thinks you need it to survive. I do define it as evil because it doesn't care what damage it does to you in the process, But it is also important to recognize that cravings and overeating, they're not a disease. They're not a sign of a sick mind. The people who had the strongest cravings and who could eat the most back when food was really scarce 100,000 years ago, those are the people that would have a survival advantage. So we had to get really motivated to go find the food and eat the food and store the food. We had to have that. And it's the same mechanism that's responsible for developing those cravings, that's responsible for extinguishing cravings. So there's no such thing as being broken or powerless. Unless you have a lesion in your ventromedial hypothalamus or have had some type of brain operation or brain injury or something like that, it's possible you could be damaged like that. And even then, there are things you can do. But most people succumb to the notion that they're powerless, and they don't recognize it's really just a biological error, which is facilitated by all of the industrial food processing and chemicals and advertising that's out there to try to capture your survival drive and make you believe with every bone in your body that you need that chocolate bar, a piece of pizza, or a donut in order to survive because your brain thinks it's keeping you alive. So I think that's the insight you're trying to get to. Semantically, I find it important to have no sympathy for the pig. And so we define it as only those desires which are against your best interest. When the survival drive is acting in your best interest, then you love it. And when it's acting against your best interest, you don't. The reason for that is that it's very powerful. The reptilian brain, the seat of the survival drive, has the ability to push our rational brain out of the way if it perceives an emergency. And so we need a very primitive guttural reaction, almost a reaction of disgust and contempt when we feel like that thing is getting activated and wanting to take control. That's why I correct people when they start to sympathize with the pig in some way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the pig itself is a semantic creation. So, as a matter of definition, good survival drive is not pig, bad survival drive, that's pig.
That's 100% right. It took me a long time to figure that out. I know that once you had your big why, the need for the refutations became minimal. But before that, were there any particular refutations that were very helpful to you? Sometimes that's helpful to people to hear them.
Yeah, let me see.
What were your pig's favorite squeals? How did it try to convince you and how did you get around it?
My biggest foe in this entire journey, I would say, is distracted eating. What I found is in order to not overeat, the number one most important thing I have to do is be present for eating, right? So that means eating at the table, no TV, no scrolling on phone, no podcasts, just maybe listening to music, but that's the most distraction that I can have. Yet I've had this terrible decades long habit of eating in front of the TV. Pleasurable thing, right? It enhances the pleasure of the food and it also enhances the pleasure of the TV. And yet it also means that every single time I sit down to eat, I just keep eating until the TV show is over and I'm inevitably just stuffed and feel terrible. What the pig says about that is it's going to feel so good to turn off your brain and eat mindlessly in front of the TV. And that was a really tough squeal for me because it's true. It does feel good. It feels awesome. That's why I kept doing it, right? And so that might have actually been you on one of our group calls. Help me figure out the refutation for this, which is I don't do other destructive things just because they feel good. I don't shoot up heroin, even though that would feel good, because of the physical and legal consequences, which would be severe. So, why would I do this behavior that's going to shorten my life and reduce my happiness just because it feels good?
That's terrific. And you found that very convincing.
Yeah, getting the higher brain in the way of that pleasure drive, right? It's like, hey, that's going to feel good. And in the first instance, it's so convincing. Oh, yeah, you're right. That's not a lie, right? But the lie is hidden in it, right? And this is the lie that underlies everything the pig says. The pig's argument is always blank, therefore binge, right? You didn't sleep enough, therefore you should binge. You're angry, so you should binge. You're sick, so you should binge. Something bad happened at work, so you should binge. It doesn't matter. The pig wants you to binge, and it will treat everything as an excuse to binge. And that was the insight I got to from, specifically one day I hadn't slept enough. This was after I figured out my big why. And that's when the pig's corrupted logic became so apparent. Like I didn't sleep. I slept for like 2 hours. I felt like crap. Work was extremely stressful. I was having a bad time. And I got the whisper from the pig, like, hey, let's binge. That'll make it better. And I'm like, wait a second. That's crazy. That's absolute nonsense. If I feel like crap and then I binge, now I have one more problem on top of all my problems. I haven't solved anything. I've made it worse, right? I've poured gasoline on this fire.
100%. Binge is going to make you more tired. Most people tell me it takes 48 hours to really recover. Yeah, but the pig thinks it's a great idea in the moment. Gideon, the hesitation most people have about doing our program is one of three things. Either they think they can't afford it, or they think that they don't have the time, or they think it's not going to work for them, that it works for other people and it's not going to work for them. What would you say with regards to those three objections? From what you've seen not only in yourself, but the people in the groups and the way that we work and everything like that?
Well, in terms of ability to afford it, I would regard it as essentially looking at as not as a recreational thing, right? This is medical care. Depending on your situation, it's medical care that might be needed to save your life, right? Maybe that's not true for everybody.
Well, for legal reasons, I can only offer it as coaching, but I know what you're saying.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's not literally medical care, but if this was a drug that cost this much that could save your life, right? You would probably buy it. You would probably find a way because you want to live, right? And even if it's not a life saving intervention, when I think about my big why, I'm 40, I got a long time left to live. If I can stick to my rules 100% of the time, reach my goal in the next year or so, that's a lot of years of much better quality of life. And 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I'm going to look back on that money that I spent and think like, geez, I'm glad I spent that money. It's not something I'm going to regret by any stretch because it has unlocked such powerful tools for setting intentions and following through. In that regard, not just for eating, right? These techniques are techniques I can use for lots of other things, like if I want to exercise more, right? If I want to develop other positive habits, using these techniques of writing them down, making them into always and never rules, reviewing them daily, incorporating them with a big why, doing refutations if there's part of me that wants to say, no, don't do it. It is sort of a skeleton key for putting the logical brain in charge of my life.
Yes. The same thing with the time.
Yeah, it's hard to give advice about fitting it into your life. I feel very lucky. I'm childless and live by myself. So I have as much time as I want to devote. So if you've got a whole bunch of kids, a really chaotic home life, I could see how that would be a stretch to incorporate yet another thing. But I would just say it's worth it. If you're able to achieve your health goals vis-a-vis weight, and 10 years later, you're not going to regret whatever mountains you had to move to do this program. The coaching sessions are only 15 minutes. Sometimes I wish they were longer, but if all you've got is 15 minutes, it's perfect.
Well, and if you can get the overeating under control, you should most of our people report having a lot more energy when they're not constantly binging and recovering from food, and that they have more time in their life, not less. Like even though there is some work involved up front, you get out what you put in, but you get a lot less when you're binging because you have to constantly recover from it. And most people that we talk to are binging at least once a week, losing at least a day or two of productive time because of that. We think it's something that puts time into your life, not something that takes time out of your life, but I guess everybody has to decide for themselves.
Yeah. And if I could say another thing about it, I do kind of look at it as learning an essential life skill. These are techniques that I wish I had learned much earlier in life, right? Like this is like going to college, but for what would you even call it? Like integrity school, how to be true to yourself, but in like a very logical, step by step, straightforward way. It's not like a bunch of aphorisms. That's not my favorite word, but it's not a bunch of just like affirming sayings that are just like, hey, you're going to
I'm
feel
good
good.
enough and I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me.
Right. It's not that. It really is like step one, Here's how you start. Step 2, step 3, just one at a time, building up your skills. I mean, you use the analogy for training wheels all the time. It really is like step by step, learn to ride this bicycle called life so that you can go to the destination you really want to go to. Stop crashing all the time, right?
Thank you, Gideon. I think so too. The last one is that people think that other people can do it, but they can't. Gideon and Glenn, they're really smart guys and they worked at this and they can do it, but I can never do it. What would you say about that from what you've seen and what you know about the system?
I guess I would say this one is a little hard for me because I do like to think of myself as being special. I'm a special boy. I have a human brain. And this is something I say about intermittent fasting. People say, I couldn't do that. I have a human brain. I have a human body. There are things that I'm really good at that maybe other people aren't. But there are things that other people are really good at that I'm not, right? We all have our strengths and weaknesses, but we all have something in common, which is a human genome, which creates a human brain and a human body. And if there's something one human can do, every other human has the inherent ability to do it, especially what we're talking about with this program, right? This program isn't like learn theoretical physics, right? This program is use your mind. That's kind of what we're learning to do is take our logical minds, our thinking minds that we all have, our ability to reason and plan and follow through on an intention. We're born with that. And we're also all born with the ancient survival drive that has the power to run amok and push us around and torture us. And so I think we all have the ability to cage that pig and put our higher selves in the driver's seat just by virtue of our brain anatomy and our genes.
And there are no advanced concepts here. Probably the most advanced one is the extinction curve, which just really says that there's a discrete period of time during which you'll have cravings that follow a particular pattern, and you need to plan for that period of time. But there are no advanced concepts. There's nothing that requires more than a fifth grade level of education. There's nothing that I couldn't explain to a fifth grader. And we have people of all ages and genders and social strata and occupations that are learning how to adopt a discipline with food that they never had before. I've always thought that the idea that I'm broken, other people can do it, but I can't, it's nothing more than a pig squeal in and of itself. It's just a justification that the pig has, because after that description is you might as well keep binging, right? And so I'd ask people to take a hard look at if you think you're broken, how specifically are you broken? Is there something wrong with your brain? Is there an inability to articulate what the pig might be saying? Is there an inability to think logically in all areas of life? Or does it just seem to apply to food? And if it just applies to food, then, and I hear this all the time, people say I can conquer just about any other demon and I've accomplished so many things in my life, but when it comes to food, I'm broken. But the brain doesn't really work like that. If you can do it in all these other areas, you can do it in food also. It means you have the capacity to reason. You have the capacity to direct yourself with reason. So you have the capacity to use these techniques to do what Gideon and I have done. Gideon, is there anything else that I should have asked you that I didn't?
I thought of one other argument for the you can do it, which is the more your pig tortures you, I think the more motivation you probably have to make that torture stop, right? I could see it being the case that if you're basically healthy and at the weight you want to be, it might be harder to find motivation. But if you feel like I've spent my life being obsessed with food and I'm so unhappy about it, that's your spark, right? That's the fire. You can just light a fire and, off like a shot. Not to say that it will be easy, but you have that powerful force, powerful reason to change that means you can definitely do it.
Very good. I like that. Is there anything I can help you with before we wind down for today?
I know your thoughts about intermittent fasting, but I did want to address that a little bit. I'm kind of in line with your thoughts on intermittent fasting in a lot of ways, where you say, don't do intermittent fasting for 6 months when you start this program, which I generally agree with that. But my caveat is unless you've been intermittent fasting for a really long time and you're really good at it. That's my situation. Like I said in the beginning, I've been intermittent fasting for like 10 years. I'm really good at it. Having my big why allowed me to just always hit my fasts, never have any internal debate about if I'm going to do the fast that I decided to do. And then during my eating periods, I'm not having any snacks, no night eating, having the number of meals I wanted, eating at the table without distractions. That's kind of what I wanted to add.
What I've seen is that if people have been doing it for a long time and it works well for them, it is possible for them to use it right away in the program. When it doesn't work is when they're using intermittent fasting kind of like binging on a schedule and they're having a lot of processed foods during the windows when they can't eat. Their system is just so destabilized from the flour and sugar and excitotoxins and salt and everything that when you combine that with the irregularity of the calories going through the system, the cravings are just too much to take. And I think biochemically what's happening in that situation is that they're having trouble getting fat adapted. And I think that's what's supposed to happen when you're intermittent fasting is you're supposed to get fat adapted. I know just enough about the actual procedure to be dangerous. I've never really done it myself. I just know that when I statistically look at how people do, when they say they're intermittent fasting right away, I kind of go, uh-oh. I do ask them how long they've been doing it, and I get about half the success rate if they insist up front. That's why I have the policy that I do. I think that what you're saying is probably true. It's just a lot safer, on a statistical basis for us to give the advice that we do.
I'm definitely in the situation of being fat adapted. Like fasting is very easy. I don't really get negative symptoms most of the time. I also did want to clarify what my situation is. I haven't really started to lose much weight yet. So I've gotten to the point where I'm just like easily following my rules. And my rules currently aren't really restricting foods, it's restricting when I eat, when and where. So now I'm kind of at the stage of figuring out the right set of rules and also just the right approach to eating. My plan is if I can avoid restricting entire food groups, I would like to, but that doesn't mean I'm going to eat crap all the time, right? It's more about, well, what is the daily way of eating that will enable me to lose weight and feel that I'm eating good food that I like? What I kind of want to avoid is the obsessive grocery shopping and checking the ingredients on everything or having to scratch cook everything because that doesn't sound like a good time to me. Not that I'm pushing that as something that anyone else should do.
Good. You found a way that really works for you. That's terrific.
Yeah, my intention is I think my diet needs some improvement. I think I need to maybe not eat cheese. Probably don't need a rule against cheese because all I have to do is not buy it. And after eating it and observing, like, oh, I'm eating too much cheese and not losing weight. Okay, next time I go to the store, that's not on the list, right? But also, I don't think I need to be in the place of like, uh-oh, this food has a small amount of cheese in it. I just committed a sin, right?
Right. We'll take you to cheese prison. You wake up in a cell with 4 gray walls and a new husband, Bubba. Got to think of mozzarella for you.
Yeah.
Good, Gideon. Do you have any questions or concerns?
No, I'm good.
I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the groups, okay?
And I want to say, I'm excited to share this with my family because this book has been so great for me. Not like, hey, read this book, fat people. But,
Right.
maybe having this podcast episode or recording, they'd be able to hear more detail about what this process has been like for me and check it out.
That'd be terrific. Okay, well, we'll get it out soon.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks, Gideon.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. If you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.